If you've ever believed that some mistakes are actually destiny in disguise, this story will touch your heart. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more touching stories that remind us of the unexpected ways love finds us. The security alarm blared through the empty office floor, piercing the silence of the late evening. Jack Harper froze, his hand still on the door handle of what he thought was the janitor's closet. Instead, he found himself staring at the wide-eyed woman inside, her blouse halfway buttoned as she quickly pulled her blazer across her chest. Recognition hit him like a thunderbolt. Eliza Montgomery, the newly appointed CEO of Horizon Technologies, the very company that had just hired him as a maintenance supervisor. Her normally commanding presence was momentarily shattered, and in that fractured second, he saw something in her eyes he recognized all too well, the same vulnerability he'd seen in the mirror every day since his wife's death 3 years ago. "I'm so sorry," he stammered, backing away. "The maintenance office, they told me it was." "Down the hall," she whispered, her voice unexpectedly fragile, so different from the confident tone he'd heard in the company-wide announcement earlier that day. "It's down the hall." Then, almost inaudibly, she added, "Please don't tell anyone you saw me like this." That broken whisper would change everything. What Jack didn't know then was that the powerful CEO of Horizon Technologies had been changing more than just her clothes. She'd been changing bandages from a surgery no one at the company knew about, a battle she was fighting silently, alone. Jack Harper had never planned on falling in love again. After losing Sarah to cancer, he'd structured his entire life around one purpose: providing stability for his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Working late nights as a maintenance supervisor wasn't glamorous, but it allowed him to be there for school drop-offs and pickups, for homework help and weekend adventures. When he accidentally walked into Eliza Montgomery's office that night, love was the furthest thing from his mind. The morning after their awkward encounter, Jack found himself summoned to the executive floor. Heart pounding, he sat across from Eliza, now perfectly composed in her tailored suit, her auburn hair swept into an immaculate bun. The vulnerability he'd glimpsed was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Harper," she began, her voice steady and professional, "about last night." "I didn't see anything," he interrupted quickly. "And I wouldn't tell anyone if I had." Something in her expression shifted slightly. "Thank you, but that's not why I called you here." She paused, studying him. "Your file says you used to work in architectural restoration before you changed careers." Jack nodded, surprised she'd looked into his background. "Before my wife got sick, yes." A flicker of understanding crossed her face. "We have a special project, restoring the original woodwork in the company's historic conference room. The board wants it preserved, but every specialist we've hired has suggested modernizing it instead. Would you be interested in taking on the project?" It would mean additional compensation, of course. It was an olive branch, he realized, a way to transform their awkward meeting into a professional opportunity. But something about her demeanor, the way her fingers nervously tapped her desk, told him there was more to the story. What Jack didn't know then was that Eliza Montgomery had fought her way to the CEO position against tremendous odds. At 41, she'd broken glass ceilings and outmaneuvered corporate rivals who whispered she was too young, too female, too emotional to lead. What the business world didn't know was that she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer 6 months ago, underwent a double mastectomy 2 weeks before taking the CEO position, and was still recovering while projecting an image of unwavering strength to a board watching for any sign of weakness. The restoration project became their neutral ground. 3 evenings a week, after most employees had gone home, Jack would work on the intricate wooden panels of the historic conference room while Eliza worked late at her desk. Sometimes she would stop by, ask questions about the techniques he was using, or bring him coffee. Their conversations gradually extended beyond the woodwork to their lives outside Horizon Technologies. "Lily wants to be an astronaut," Jack found himself telling Eliza one evening, showing her a photo of his gap-toothed daughter wearing a NASA t-shirt. "Her science teacher says she has real potential." "Smart girl," Eliza commented with a genuine smile. Horizon has a STEM mentorship program for employees' children. Would she be interested? The invitation was how Lily Harper, at age 10, began visiting Horizon's research department every other Saturday, her eyes wide with wonder as female engineers showed her how to code simple robots and build miniature rocket models. It was also how Jack began seeing Eliza outside work hours, waiting together while Lily absorbed everything the mentors taught her. Over coffee in the building's atrium, watching Lily through the glass walls of the lab, Eliza finally shared her truth. "I was diagnosed last year," she said quietly, her fingers wrapped tightly around her cup. "The surgery was 2 weeks before I accepted the CEO position. No one at the company knows. If the board found out..." She left the sentence unfinished. Jack understood immediately. "You think they wouldn't have chosen you if they'd known?" "I know they wouldn't have," she replied, her voice hardening. "They would have seen it as a liability, a distraction. I've worked too hard to let that happen." Their connection deepened through this shared vulnerability, her private battle with cancer, his ongoing grief for his wife who had lost the same fight. Both carrying wounds they hid from the world, both putting on brave faces for different reasons, Eliza for her career, Jack for his daughter. As spring turned to summer, Jack finished the restoration project, but his evening visits to the executive floor didn't end. Now he came with takeout dinner on the nights Eliza had chemotherapy, sitting quietly with her as she reviewed reports, making sure she ate something even when the treatment destroyed her appetite. Some nights, when fatigue overwhelmed her, he would drive her home, carefully helping her into his modest sedan while scanning the parking garage to ensure no one from the company saw them. Their relationship existed in a careful bubble of secrecy, not just because of the obvious gap in their professional standings, but because Eliza couldn't risk anyone questioning her ability to lead. And for Jack, there was the question of Lily, who had already lost one mother figure. He couldn't risk introducing another unless he was certain she would stay. The complications mounted when Richard Hargrove, Horizon's ambitious CFO who had expected the CEO position for himself, began noticing Eliza's occasional absences and the maintenance supervisor who seemed unusually comfortable on the executive floor. His suspicious glances and pointed questions created a new layer of tension. "He's looking for any reason to undermine me," Eliza confided to Jack one evening as they sat in her living room, long after she had finally invited him to her home. "If he connects my treatment days to my performance, or if he finds out about us." Jack reached for her hand, noticing how thin her wrists had become. "Then we'll be more careful." But careful wasn't enough when Hargrove assigned his assistant to track Eliza's schedule, documenting her off days and eventually following her to the oncology center. The board meeting that followed was brutal, veiled concerns about her health situation and whether she had the stamina for the demanding role, questions about why she hadn't disclosed her condition during the selection process. Jack waited anxiously in his apartment that night, Lily already asleep, when the knock came. Eliza stood in his doorway, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "They're voting tomorrow," she said simply. "On whether to keep me." That night, as she slept fitfully beside him for the first time, Jack made a decision. The next morning, after dropping Lily at school, he walked into Richard Hargrove's office without an appointment. "I know what you're doing," Jack said without preamble. "And I know why." Hargrove's smug smile faltered slightly. "Maintenance is 2 floors down, Harper." "I'm not here about maintenance. I'm here about Eliza Montgomery, and how you've been trying to sabotage her because you wanted her job." The confrontation that followed revealed more than Jack had expected: Hargrove's resentment, yes, but also his genuine concern about the company's stability. "She's hiding things," Hargrove insisted. "The board deserves transparency." "She's beating cancer while running this company better than anyone expected," Jack countered. "Including you." By the time Jack left Hargrove's office, something had shifted. He didn't know if he'd made things better or worse, but he knew he couldn't stand by while Eliza fought alone. The board vote resulted in a narrow victory for Eliza, with the unexpected support of Richard Hargrove, who publicly stated his confidence in her leadership despite her health challenges. What no one realized was that Jack's passionate defense had reminded Hargrove of his own sister's battle with the same disease, a perspective that changed everything. As Eliza completed her treatment and received the all-clear from her doctors, her relationship with Jack slowly emerged from the shadows. The corporate gossip was predictable at first: whispers about the CEO and the maintenance supervisor, speculation about his motives and her judgment. But as months passed, the unusual pairing became just another fact of life at Horizon Technologies. For Lily Harper, the transition was both simpler and more complex. "Are you my mom now?" she asked Eliza one Sunday morning as they made pancakes together, Jack still asleep down the hall. Eliza's hands stilled on the mixing bowl. "I could never replace your mom, Lily. But I would be honored to be a second person who loves you that much." Lily considered this with the serious contemplation of a now 11-year-old. "That seems reasonable," she finally declared, and that was that. When Jack proposed a year later, it wasn't with grand gestures or public declarations. Instead, it happened during a hospital visit, not for Eliza this time, but for Jack's father, who had suffered a minor stroke. As they sat in the waiting room, the same hospital where Jack had lost his wife, where Eliza had received her diagnosis, he turned to her with sudden clarity. "I think I've been sentenced to loving you for life," he said quietly. "And I'm completely at peace with that." Her eyes filled with tears as she understood the weight of his words, that loving again had felt impossible for him after such loss, that opening himself to the possibility of more grief had seemed like a punishment. Until it didn't. "Is that your idea of a proposal, Jack Harper?" she asked, her voice carrying that same broken quality he'd heard the first night they met, but now filled with hope instead of fear. "It is," he confirmed. "Although I had planned something more romantic than a hospital cafeteria." Their wedding was small but joyful, with Lily serving as both flower girl and best daughter, a title she invented and insisted upon. Richard Hargrove, surprisingly, attended as a friend. The restored conference room at Horizon, where their real connection had begun, hosted the reception. 5 years later, Eliza Montgomery Harper still runs Horizon Technologies, now with an openness about her cancer journey that has made the company a leader in corporate health initiatives and medical leave policies. Jack still works in maintenance, having declined offers of promotion by association, though he now leads a special division focused on historical restoration of all company properties. Their story became legendary at Horizon: how a single father accidentally walked in on the CEO during her most vulnerable moment, how her broken whisper revealed the human behind the executive facade, how what might have been a mortifying incident transformed into a bond that saved them both in different ways. And when new employees hear the story, they learn its most important lesson, that sometimes our most embarrassing mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be, that vulnerability isn't weakness but the doorway to connection, and that love isn't a prison sentence but the most profound freedom of all. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments a time when something you thought was a mistake turned out to be the beginning of something beautiful in your life. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of unexpected love and second chances.